Can you explain any difference between various types of proposed guru, for example, Siddha Guru, Satguru, and Paratpa Guru?
Like originally, different streams of consciousness incarnated on this planet. So there were original gurus whose lineages were here. Consciousness itself, right? So the consciousness which possesses knowledge is a guru. So when it was complete, there was no such a thing as guru. When consciousness is complete, so from the beginning, there's no such a notion. You start having gurus only after there is some form of fragmentation, where one part of consciousness retains more knowledge than the other. So there is a sort of a exchange of knowledge or experiences. Consciousness itself is guru, and it can operate through whoever. Then there are different frequencies within this consciousness. So these different frequencies can be also manifest through the physical form or some kind of form, because again, through different areas we have different forms, different subtleties. So in this current day and age, we learn through reflection. Life itself is a guru. Why? Because life is inseparable from consciousness. So consciousness manifests itself through life. So all these fragments of our consciousness through whom we reflect ourselves, which are like people and circumstances, situations, they are our gurus. They teach us. They teach us, they show us what we are, if we are enough attentive and aware to, notice. But very often we're not. So we choose to victimize ourselves through the circumstances or become victimized by other people because we don't treat them or approach them as our teachers, as someone who reflects our corrupt being. So if we speak about gurus in terms of the corrupt age we're in, so the lower age, the age of degradation, whatever you call it, the age of lower frequencies. So everything is dispersed in this age. And so every fragment is some sort of a reflection of our being in our reality. So our existence is like, it has a purpose of recollecting ourselves, meaning literally collecting ourselves together, seeing our reflections through different splinters of different manifested bits and parts of consciousness. And so the only way we can do it is by having interaction with different elements of reality, whether it's living or non-living according to our human understanding. So clashing with objects and people, and so-called learning through situations, circumstances. What comes to real gurus, which are relevant for different yugas, but to some degree are also existent or can exist in this yuga. It's a representation of a specific cluster of consciousness within the collective. Let's say higher consciousness. So it has higher frequency, higher presence. So different groups and categories of people within the collective, according to their frequency, find their gurus. So according to their corruption in this day and age, they will find that guru. They cannot find any other guru except that which reflects their corruption. And as long as that corruption exists there, they will not be able to evolve and recognize any other guru on any other frequency. So Siddha gurus are something very, very ununderstandable, incomprehensive for this day and age, because it's a frequency that is not dominant in this day and age. It's a frequency of a higher yuga, but still this frequency exists in a very, very small quantity within the collective. And so that frequency cannot be found by the soul that does not aim at connecting to that frequency, or which has no predisposition to recognize that frequency, because many, many souls are veiled and corrupt in this day and age. But if they are of the same kind, if in their past, from the beginning of cycle, they somewhat were connected to this frequency or were part of this frequency, they will find a way to this frequency one way or the other. In this day and age, very difficult to find, very difficult to hold on to. But in the coming ages, it will be easier for those who will be in those coming, that consciousness that will refine to come to that coming age. So, different people may share their experiences. So people may say they're teachers for them. Maybe they offer them perspective that they didn't have. They call them teachers, but guru is something else. Guru is someone who appears as one, but holds the whole lineage in their vibration, who is consciously a cumulative, existence, a higher cluster of consciousness that emanates the existences of all the other gurus together within the lineage, let's say. So we think in a human context that lineage is some kind of a line of different units. This Guru 1, Guru 2, Guru 3. But in a spiritual sense, it's always about merging and conscious unification. These beings do not retain their individuality. And this is what many people who have especially strong individuality cannot comprehend, because they haven't dissolved their own individuality. So they will attract and be attracted to gurus who resemble that individuality, not a higher frequency. Because they have no opening within their crystallized individuality. Opening means there is a sense of humility and surrender through which the higher frequency can slip in. Of course, I'm trying to logically explain something that is illogical and irrational. But higher consciousness is always cumulative. That's why it's so potent. It can't exist in many bodies. But the body that it chooses to exist in will need to go through a process of transformation. That's why in Siddha teaching, we hear about all these different methods of body preservation. That's not for sake of beauty or longevity, meaning how many years I live or don't. It's about being able to sustain and contain that higher frequency. Otherwise, that higher frequency can decompose the body in a second. So that's why there are these sciences like KayaKalpa or other yogic alchemical sciences that aimed at the preservation of one body for the sake of the lineage, so that one body is potent enough and strong enough to contain higher frequency and higher radiation for the purpose of other beings who are still in a dispersed state of being and consciousness. So that type of learning and understanding is incomprehensible and mostly inaccessible for the majority of current beings. So for them to come across true gurus is impossible. And why? Their own ego, their own limitations are the impediment. Their own conscious, limitation, corruption becomes an impediment. Because at this point of time, all they can do is manifest the guru of their corruption, the guru of their impediment, or someone who is maybe a bit more advanced, maybe knows a little bit more, does a little bit more, but in their essence, they reflect that corruption because, or have some part of that corruption within themselves at least. So the majority will have these kind of gurus. The more you refine yourself, and the result of this refinement is the level of purity, which is the level of humility, that allows you to see clearer, to see through the veils within yourself, and thus to see through the veils outside of self. So the deeper you know yourself, the deeper you see through these veils within yourself, even if you still have certain veils, but the deeper you see through them, the more chance you are attracting a guru that can help you to remove these veils, see through these veils. Many people attract gurus who promise them salvation or onto whom they rely completely, as if they were saviors or someone who's going to resolve all the problems. So, because they approach gurus or whoever they are, teachers, in this submissive and victimized way, they become victims of these beings, because these beings are too corrupt and see that they can take advantage of these submissive beings. True learning does not happen through submissiveness. Surrender, yes, but not submissiveness. True teaching does not happen through, or through this sort of worship or power distance. Because a true guru will not select a true disciple or an adept if they don't see them as equal to themselves or even higher in some cases. Because the true guru will not allow power distance, because true guru understands that they are connected to a high existence, and that high existence or higher frequency is the guru, is not their form. So because their focus is not on the form, they teach formless, and they attract those who are looking for the formless. But ordinary teachers or man-made gurus, they are within the form, they operate within the form, they teach about the form, and they attract those who focus on their form or live through their form only, without having the slightest idea of the subtler or multidimensional existence of consciousness beyond this body. So Siddha Gurus is Siddha consciousness, means high frequency of our collective and beyond our collective existence, which allows us to navigate through times and cycles, and which allows us to retain that higher frequency or remind us of higher frequency within ourselves. But Siddha consciousness is far too advanced to comprehend in this day and age. So that's why it's not something that you can actually even come across or easily manifest. There must be some kind of a connection so that it becomes your reality. Maybe you manifest, but you can't comprehend because the frequency is beyond your current ability to understand what it is. So the more we dissolve our crust of our limited consciousness, the more we recognize without even a need to acknowledge it, it becomes our reality. In that reality, we meet, or kind of like we realize the formless existence of the teaching, the guru, the lineage, all in one. It's like one space of existence where there's no difference. As long as you can access it within yourself, in that unified field, there is no guru or adept, there is just existence. But for the majority of currently living beings who are tormented by their thoughts and emotions and thus diseases in the body, to comprehend this frequency is impossible until they refine themselves. And even some beings may refine themselves, but they still have no ability to reach that level of purity, to connect to that level of frequency or unified field for longer than some seconds or minutes. And thus it still remains veiled. So we're living in the day of an age of corrupt spirituality and thus corrupt gurus. And there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone needs some sort of a beacon light to follow or to look up to, whether they are dwarves, elves, ghosts, demons. They need someone to lead them. Whether they are intellectuals, emotional beings, they need someone because they haven't discovered their own power. Because it's too difficult to discover your own power being in or living in the age of dispersion. So one needs to have some maturity to recognize, first of all, that this is the age of dispersion. And this recognition alone does not make difference. After the recognition, you need to make an effort to look for the existence which is beyond your imagination, which is beyond your thoughts, which is beyond your emotions. Well, how can you look for it if there's no one to tell you about it, or even there are people to tell you, but you have no experience? So here, the role of a guru is to offer direct experience of that unified existence. But to offer that experience doesn't mean that those who are offered can contain it or necessarily cultivate it. So they need to discover that within themselves and cultivate it so that they stop holding on to forms or projections or attach themselves to someone and look for empowerment from someone else or elsewhere through objects, through spiritual actions, through some religious buildings or places. You can benefit from all of this once you're connected within. So once you maintain that unified field, or you operate through it, or you act through your form, but from the standpoint of your unified being, then you may say that you're connected, so, and you become humble and wise. So that is the point where you might have grace to meet someone who is a true guru. A true guru can be only known by frequency. But if you have no ability to perceive that frequency, it is not your guru. Most of the people will connect to people who are teachers or socially known as gurus, but they are not real gurus. They are the representations of the collective corruption. And by reflecting that corruption, by fooling people, by telling them stories, by feeding them with stories, by giving them some kind of spiritual actions and instructions, eventually they will lead them nowhere. And because they face this situation where they are led nowhere, that will allow them to awaken to their corruption and to understand that they were following a false teacher in the name of a spiritual guru. So most of the people in this day and age will be extremely disappointed. And this disappointment will be the greatest teacher for them, so that one day they may learn, they may dissolve this corruption that led them to the false teaching, and they may eventually be ready by their frequency, by their purity, to meet someone who is a genuine teacher or a guru, true lineage holder. Recognize it and hold on to it. Hold not onto the guru's form, but onto that frequency that the guru invoked in them. Cultivate that frequency, dissolve further corruption within oneself, and experience higher forms of existence. That's the purpose. So through these ages of degradation, through the cycle of degradation, we created all this dispersion, even in spirituality. We created all these different tags, this guru, that guru. There are many, many teachings which somewhat carry the seed of truth. But because these lineages are dead, because there are no living teachers, living teacher means the one who is not only awakened, but who has gone through the process of refinement and transformation, and they became eligible to hold that and preserve that higher frequency of knowledge within themselves. They are connected to them, they represent it through their being. So knowledge becomes an emanation through their being. Their consciousness is a living emanation of that high frequency. And so anyone who comes across this living being and comes into their active consciousness, or they come into someone else's consciousness, there will be a connection. Through this connection, one may experience, for a glimpse or for a longer time, a unified field. But if they come closer and they deeply connect to that living master, that connection, or through that connection, one will awaken to this unified field completely, and would need to have enough trust and devotion to the purity, to that higher frequency, to maintain that higher frequency within the self, and to go through all the challenges and trials while refining self and dissolving one's veils and falsehood and delusion. So one may appear as devoted to a teacher or master, but the true devotion is not to a form of someone, but it's a devotion to the cultivation of that higher frequency within the self, so that the corruption is dissolved and the form becomes a fruit, or is refined to the point where you can see the result of this refinement in the body. So the body becomes the fruit of that purified state, perfected state. And so how many immortals do you see? How many people whose body is also perfected as well as their consciousness? How many beings you see who represent such knowledge? None. So that's why true lineages and teachings sort of went underground, because spirituality became the reflection of the demonic age, so demonic spirituality. And so even though some of the teachings still retain the seed of purity, they were mixed with the demonic ritualistic practices and thus tarnished. Those lineages started producing corrupt teachers and gurus. And so, since the true knowledge is protected by frequency, if the seed of true knowledge was planted in the corrupt soil, poisonous soil, it wouldn't sprout out. And so these lineages died naturally. Knowledge, frequency cannot die. But since there was no proper soil where it would sprout, it remains somehow without further offsprings. And even though knowledge is dead, if you are an awakened being and refined, you will see these drops of purity, drops of perfect high frequency knowledge through all these different writings and scriptures and transmissions. You will recognize and you will pay attention to the essence rather than to all this tinsel and other sort of extras that were added, later on. So you will be able to tell the weeds from the wheat, and you will weed out only that which is necessary, which is resonating with you. So higher frequency knowledge is not applicable yet. It's still there as a part of the collective, but to access that frequency, one needs to be pure. If one is not pure, which means humble and intelligent in the spiritual sense, this knowledge will be somewhat concealed or inaccessible. And so only when one is exhibiting this purity within, they resonate with that frequency of knowledge, and so that knowledge becomes accessible to them. Accessible means it's not just some, again, duality. Information is here, the person is there. It just becomes you merge with that. You're one. You're unified with that frequency, and so you simply know. It's called self-born knowledge. So true gurus exhibit self-born knowledge. They don't need to ask someone, they know from within. And it's not logical. It's just deeper and kind of, more expanded awareness, higher frequency, higher level of awareness, you may say. It's difficult to use the language because it doesn't really reflect. We always look at everything in a dispersed way. We have objects, people, so everything is like a single unit. But in the unified consciousness, all that idea is dissolved. Everything is dissolved. It's only awareness and knowledge that exists there. So on the level of just normal human existence, anyone can be a guru. If you honor other people, if you honor certain areas they're experts in, you honor their knowledge, you honor their expertise, you honor their skills, and you may learn from them so they become your teachers. But guru is something different. Guru is the presence of higher consciousness in your field, whether it is you who connect to that higher consciousness through purity, and by that you manifest the genuine guru who emanates that frequency and beyond. Or you come across, again, only when you still have at least a drop of that purity and humility and higher frequency within yourself, that light essence, which may manifest as a living guru. And you have enough dedication to go through whatever trials and challenges within yourself. Again, these are not the trials and challenges that the gurus form invoke in you, but it's the connection with a higher consciousness that pushes everything unnecessary to the surface. Unnecessary meaning this is corruption, it burdens, it's heavy. So the presence of that higher consciousness within you, and through the connection with the living being, who is a guru, living master, living higher frequency being, so through that connection, you, even without words and any instructions, just by being connected through your mind with that frequency, dissolving your mind in that frequency will dissolve all your corruption, veils, ignorance, negativity, step by step, smoothly, sometimes with upheavals, but still it will be bearable by your consciousness and body. And so true teaching is through presence rather than through words. But there are a lot of beings who need to understand higher frequency with the help of words. And that's where true transmission can also be with words, supplemented with that frequency or emanating that frequency through words. So words help the mind that is still in bondage to connect the dots and comprehend more abstract forms of existence through kind of logical mind. So through different forms of teaching. So you can only comprehend that form of teaching that you resonate yourself with. And if you're logical, you will fall for logical teachings. If you are superior, inferior, you will fall for the teaching which will teach you to balance, because life itself, high frequency itself, it balances everything out. If anything goes out of balance, it pushes one to balance, and the body, the mind might resist it. The corruption within may resist it, but high frequency is there anyways, so you can't fool it. It will keep on emanating until that imbalance is neutralized and turned to balance. That's the teaching already itself. Life is of a type of justice or balance. Everything in this life is a balance. And when we create our man-made reality, everything in the man-made reality is imbalanced, out of balance. So the existence of the higher consciousness in the collective pushes everything into balance. That's why in this day and age there's so much suffering and so many challenges and so many trials, because we as a collective consciousness went out of balance. We accumulated a lot of corruption and falsehood in ourselves. And so when we exist through the living body, there's only one purpose, is to purify, to dissolve distortions, to dissolve veils, and to come back to balance. That's why true spirituality is always neutral and natural. It's a spirituality of balance. It's not about what you do or don't do, but just by frequency, if something is out of balance, it will be pushed to balance. And on the physical level, on the mental level, emotion, it may feel like a havoc. I want to go in this direction, follow this direction, but life pushes me into the other. I feel pain. Pain is the indication you're going against yourself. You're doing something wrong. You're not following your heart. You're not following your true purpose. You see? And so already our inner being indicates us, it teaches us, that's the guru. The higher consciousness will always push us through pain and trials to understand that we've created imbalance on some level. So we will feel uncomfortable. Why do you think we feel anxiety, restlessness, pain? It's because our higher being, that higher frequency somewhere tells us we're going against our natural flow. And so sooner or later we'll awaken to it and we will try to balance. But there are some beings in the physical bodies who never care about whatever misery and imbalance they go through, because they are that frequency that doesn't care, that enjoys misery and veiled states, the states of ignorance. So everyone will find their own way to learn. Everyone learns through life anyways, because this life is the reflection of our collective consciousness, which is dispersed at the moment. But if we talk about truly evolved spiritual beings, they dissolve their identity. They exist in higher frequency light forms as a collective. And if they choose to operate through someone in a physical form, this form will be transformed and will emanate at higher frequency to the degrees possible through this form to make it be visible and not to dissolve into nothing. So that frequency will be maintained, and through that frequency, those souls who are mature and who are ready to receive that higher frequency learning will be able to connect it and receive that learning just through that connection. Whether they do anything spiritually or don't, just live their lives.